Hello everyone and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today is Tuesday, so this is the waiver wire video for week 10. It's hard to imagine that we're already in week 10. Football season's just going by so fast, over halfway done at this point in time. But we're going to be talking about some waiver wire targets for this week. Not the greatest overall week in terms of waivers. Typically, I look at guys that are 50% rostered or less on both ESPN and Yahoo, and that's the cutoff for my list. There may be some other guys out there in your league. If you got any questions about them, just let me know. We're going to start off with the quarterback position, though. First off, we got Ben Roethlisberger, who did play last night. So he is 21 out of 30, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 20.2 points. This is 6 point per passing scoring format. In week 9, he is rostered in 17% of ESPN leagues, 27% of Yahoo leagues. Gets a pretty easy matchup against the Detroit Lions in week 10, so maybe a streamable quarterback for next week if you really need somebody to plug in there. But like I was saying, there ain't much out there this week. So we're going to go with the other quarterback that I do have listed here, Trevor Siemian. This is assuming he's going to be the starter too. We'll go back to Big Ben just real briefly. So my fab recommendation on Big Ben probably be just like 1 or 2% of your fab budget, if that. Then Trevor Siemian coming in next. 25 out of 41, 249 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 19.96 points in week 9. Rostered in 4% of ESPN leagues, 5% of Yahoo leagues. Plays the Titans in week 10. They have not been the best in terms of their defensive back so far this year, even though they did pretty well against the Rams. So could be a get-right game for the Saints coming off that tough loss against the Atlanta Falcons, but just keep in mind Taysom Hill could end up being the starter this week as well. So I wouldn't recommend spending probably more than 0 to 1% of your fab budget on Trevor Siemian at this point in time. Maybe if you think Taysom Hill is going to be ready and going to be the starter this week, you can also look at him. Then we move over to running back, and this was a guy that I talked up last week, and everybody else just acted like he didn't exist, and it's Devonta Freeman. Latavius Murray is still dealing with an ankle issue. It was supposedly a high ankle sprain. He might still not play this week. So Devonta Freeman was that lead back against the Vikings once again. Played 58% of snaps. He saw 13 carries for 79 yards. That's pretty good. 3 targets, 2 receptions, 4 yards, and 1 touchdown. 16.3 points in week 9, 14% roster on ESPN, 21% on Yahoo. He plays against the Miami Dolphins in week 10, which should be a favorable matchup for the Baltimore Ravens and for Devonta Freeman. So Devonta Freeman, I probably spend like 2 to 5% of my fab budget on him. If I really need a running back, maybe just a little bit more, but there is always the chance that Latavius Murray could be returning this week as well. Then we got Carlos Hyde, who was filling in for James Robinson this past week. Played 79% of snaps, 21 carries, 67 yards. Not the greatest yards per carry there, but overall it was okay. He had 2 targets, 1 reception for 6 yards, 6.3 points because he did lose a fumble in week 9. Roster in 29% of ESPN leagues, 34% of Yahoo leagues. Decent chance that he's out there, plays against the Colts in week 10. James Robinson could be back in this one, so I wouldn't recommend spending probably above 2 to 3% of your fab budget on Carlos Hyde this week. Then next up, we got Jordan Howard, who's performed on back-to-back weeks. This week, he played 40% of snaps. Last week, it was 25%. He had 17 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown, 13.1 points in week 9. He's rostered in 9% of ESPN leagues, 14% of Yahoo leagues. Pretty good chance that he's still out there. Goes against Denver in week 10, who's struggled at times against the run so far this year, especially missing their starting linebackers. So Jordan Howard looking at like a guy that you could actually roll out next week if you need to do so. Probably, spend 3 to 4% of your fab budget on it. Like I said, this waiver wire week is just not that great. So I'm not really spending up on any of these guys at this point in time. Then we got my boy, Jeff Wilson Jr. So he was activated off the PUP this week. He did not play a single snap in this game. He's rostered in 12% of ESPN leagues, 31% of Yahoo leagues, plays the Rams in week 10. Just a guy you want to pick up, stash on the end of your bench, and see what happens. So probably 1 to 2% of your fab budget because he could end up being the lead guy in this backfield. But maybe they just didn't want to roll him out there week 1 unless they had to. We're going to get over to the wide receivers, but I'm going to talk real quick. There's a couple other running backs you could look at that didn't make this list. Devin Singletary is there if Zach Moss is out. He's a little bit above 50%. And then Dearness Johnson, the guy I look at too. The news kind of came out with the Browns since I made these slides that Nick Chubb and Demetric Felton are both on the COVID list at this point in time. If they're not able to clear for this weekend's game, Dearness Johnson is looking pretty nice. If he's available in your league, maybe you pick him up. Probably spend 5 to 10% of your fab budget because he's a guy that you could plug and play starter if both those guys would miss. Then we move over to the wide receiver position. We got Brandon Aiyuk, played 93% of snaps this past week. Saw 8 targets, 6 receptions, 89 yards, and 1 touchdown. And it's important to note, this is after George Kittle came back. Deebo Samuel was out there too, so it's really nice to see Brandon Aiyuk kind of hitting his stride once again. 18.7 points in week 9. He's rostered in about 46% of ESPN leagues, so decent chance that he's out there. And then Yahoo League, 61%, so he's a little bit above that threshold. But knowing Brandon Aiyuk, there is a lot of upside here, so that's why I figure I mentioned him. Goes against the Rams in week 10 as well, so not the best matchup in the world, but they could get behind and have to throw the ball too as well. Then we're going back to Van Jefferson this week, and he played 96% of snaps this week. 7 targets, 3 receptions, 41 yards, 7.1 points in week 9. Definitely not the best performance in the world, but a guy that's out there, a guy that if something ever happened to Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp is going to see a massive, massive increase in volume. So definitely somebody that you should have on your bench at this point in time, especially if you're a little bit of a wide receiver Navy team. You can plug and play him in a bye week situation if you really, really need to. Roster in 43% of ESPN and Yahoo leagues. He goes against the 49ers in week 10, which is a very favorable matchup at this point in time. So Van Jefferson probably spending like 3 to 5% of my fab budget on him. Definitely a guy that has a little bit of upside. Then we'll move back to Rashod Bateman. We talk about him pretty much every week at this point in time. Played 66% of snaps, so he's stuck at that threshold at this point in time. We'll see what it looks like when Sammy Watkins comes back, if he does end up coming back next week. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 52 yards, 10.2 points in week 9. Rostered in 25% of ESPN leagues, 36% of Yahoo leagues. Plays against the Dolphins in week 10, which is a hit or miss matchup. It looks a little bit better on paper, but Byron Jones and Xavier Howard are still good corners, and they're finally healthy once again. So maybe not as good as a matchup as it looks like on paper, but Rashod Bateman, probably somebody I spent up to 3% of my fab budget on at this point in time. Then we have Elijah Moore, who obviously had the big Thursday night game, played 60% of snaps, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns. Although both his touchdowns did come on broken coverage where the safety wasn't where they were supposed to be, still ended up with 2 touchdowns. 27.4 points in week 9, roster in 15% of ESPN leagues, 27% of Yahoo leagues. So there's a decent chance that he's out there, goes against the Bills in week 10, so not a very favorable matchup by any means, but a guy that you can pick up, put on the end of your bench and see how he plays throughout the rest of the year and maybe becomes somebody that you can use on a weekly basis. So probably 3 to 5% of your fab budget. There might be some in your league that goes a little bit higher on him because there was a lot of people that were really in on Elijah Moore during this offseason. Then we move over to the tight end position. So we got Dan Arnold play 57% of snaps this past week, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 60 yards. So he had 10 points in week 9. Looking at a guy that's getting you close to double digits points every week, having a decent amount of targets. Dan Arnold's definitely a tight end that's probably going to end up as a low-end tight end 1 by season's end. So a guy that you can put in your lineup, feel comfortable every single week. If he ends up scoring a touchdown, it's probably going to help your team quite a bit. But he is rostered in 17% of ESPN leagues, 27% of Yahoo leagues. Decent chance that he's out there. Goes against the Colts in week 10, which is kind of a hit or miss matchup in terms of tight ends. But Dan Arnold, definitely somebody you should be looking at. If you need a tight end, probably 3 to 5% of your fab budget at this point in time. Then we have the monster Pat Freiermuth, who went off last night. Played 71% of snaps, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns, 21.3 points in week 9. He's rostered in 33% of ESPN leagues, 41% of Yahoo leagues. Plays the Detroit Lions in week 10. He's kind of middle of the pack in terms of tight ends, but the Lions defense overall is not very good. And if you line up Pat Freiermuth in the slot a little more often than not, it's probably going to help him as well. But with Pat Freiermuth, I probably spend 3 to 5% of my fab budget, same as Dan Arnold, honestly. Then we'll move over to the defenses. So we got the Browns defense. They're rostered in about 50% of ESPN and Yahoo leagues, so coin flip it if they're out there. And the Browns play the Patriots this week. It's not like the greatest matchup in the world, but it's definitely one where you're not afraid of the Patriots team putting up a lot of points. Damian Harris and Brandon Bolden are both supposedly banged up at this point in time. So it could be a very weak team in terms of the Patriots on offense this week. Cleveland Browns probably spend like 2% of my fab budget on them if I was targeting them this week. Then after that, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, roster 9% of ESPN leagues, 7% of Yahoo leagues. Pretty good chance that they're out there at this point in time. And they go against the Denver Broncos this week. I know the Broncos did put up some points on the Cowboys. A lot of that was through the run. If they can stop the run, I think the Eagles have a decent chance to be a decent streaming defense this week. Probably a defense that I look at spending 1% of my fab budget on. And then we move down to the Tennessee Titans, who looked decent against the Rams on Sunday Night Football. They played the New Orleans Saints this week. If you can kind of shut down Alvin Kamara, your defense is probably going to have a good game. If they can get some sacks, if they can get some turnovers once again, Titans could be rolling in this one, so probably a 1% of my fab budget type of bid as well. But with that being said, that's a quick little rundown on all the waivers for Week 10. Like I said before, these are the ones that meet my threshold. There may be guys that are available in your leagues that are a little bit more rostered than the ones on my list. So you can always just leave a comment down below, ask a question, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Also, I think this is going to be another important week where you look at who gets dropped too, because there's going to be a couple decent players dropped this week. So the actual waivers may not be as impactful as some of these guys that are actually getting dropped. So those are the ones you really want to keep your eye out for as well. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to leave them in the comments as well. But with that being said, if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. It helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your fantasy football team, helping you with DFS, whether it's NFL or NBA. Talking a little bit of football and injury news here, especially when it comes to the starts and sits for the week. And then with that being said, if you are a new or current subscriber who's yet to do so, also hit that notification bell down below. It's going to let you know every single time I post up a new video. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so I'll be doing this Thursday night football starts and sits for that game. I believe it is between the Miami Dolphins and the Baltimore Ravens. Should be a very interesting game. Probably one that the Ravens do run away with, though. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. And then last but not least, special shout out to each and every one of you watching today's video. I truly do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Definitely means a lot to me, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.